Headquarters in Washington, I'm Howard K. Smith.
I'm Harry Reasoner in New York. These are tonight's headlines. Rail service across the nation is crippled by the continuing strike of the Railway Clerks Union. President Nixon meets with newsmen in his first nationally televised news conference since late July. Defense counsel says that Lieutenant Calley had orders from higher up to kill every living thing at My Lai. And Secretary of State Rogers pledges that American troops will not be sent back into Cambodia. Howard?
Reports tonight on the rail strike from Gregory Jackson in New York and Kenneth Gale in Chicago, and Roger Peterson on the defense of Lieutenant Calley, Bill Downs on a game called Extinction, Sam Donaldson on a distaff breakthrough in the Senate, and tonight's comment on serving your Uncle Sam. Here's the chronology of the railroad strike. When this day was 1 minute old, 4 rail unions went on strike as threatened. At 1 a.m., Congress passed a law ordering them back to work with a pay raise to sweeten that order. At 2:10 a.m., President Nixon signed it. At 3:17 a.m., a federal judge in Washington told the unions they were breaking the law and had to go back. 3 of the unions complied, but the 4th, baggage handlers and ticket sellers, stayed out. At 5 p.m. today, the judge called C.L. Dennis, the leader of the striking union, to court to show cause why the union should not be fined for violation. After less than an hour's conference, the judge ruled the union in contempt of court and ordered the men back to work by midnight tonight. Otherwise, he said, the fine will be $200,000 a day. For a report on what the president is doing about the strike, here's ABC White House correspondent Tom Jarrell.
Faced with a strike that is crippling the economy by the minute, the president tonight signed an executive order establishing priorities for the movement of essential goods. Under the arrangement, government-regulated carriers will carry goods now on a priority basis. Top consideration will go to the movement of fuels, foods, hospital supplies, government and military personnel, certain mails, and items for the Defense Department. Transportation Secretary John Volpe explained.
We are not taking over any transportation carrier. We're not taking them over. What we're doing is trying to find as much capacity as we can in the other modes to make up at least partially for those goods that will not be able to be transported by rail. And in the case of these priority items, through the Civil Aeronautics Board, insofar as air transport is concerned, some of the wide-bodied jets might be made available to transport hospital supplies, for instance, to a community that was receiving these supplies by train and could no longer receive them by train.
Labor Secretary Hudson says he believes the one holdout union will now order its men back to work under pressure from the White House and the courts. Tom Jarrell, ABC News, Washington.
Just moments ago, the head of the clerks union, C.L. Dennis, ordered his men back to work. He said this means the strike is over.
Yohei Kanokogi wears the black belt. He's very good at what he does.
John Burns wears a different kind of black belt. Black belt aftershave and cologne. And John is very, very good at what he does. Black belt, aftershave, and cologne for the man who's very, very good.
Boy, what a life.
Yeah, you think that phone would ring sometime.
For us Maytag repairmen?
Any Maytag washer-dryer could need fixing now and then, but they're so dependable. We're the loneliest guys in town.
Pfeiffer, you took the last
No,
one.
you did. Maytag repairman. Oh. Your wife. Bring home a quart of milk.
The saddest observation about the state of America's railroads may be that when they all went on strike this morning, things weren't that much worse than usual. They would be, of course, if the strike lasted very long. For the first effects, 3 ABC News correspondents report. First, Gregory Jackson from New York.
There's always something awesome about New York, a city so huge yet so fragile. A garbage strike, a subway strike, those are near disasters, but apparently a railroad strike is not. Normally, 150,000 people pour into the city on rails, and today no one knew just what to expect, but as the city awoke, it soon became apparent that there was no crisis. Commuters switched from rails to wheels, and somehow the city simply swallowed all those cars with no sign of indigestion. In fact, traffic was entirely normal. Ironically, some of the worst jams were caused by the trains that were running. The Long Island Railroad is under a different union. Those trains came to the city limits but wouldn't cross struck lines. Instead, all passengers were dumped at subway stops, and it was up to them to do their best from there. The train stations were, of course, shut down. A few strikers meandered outside, but there wasn't much to picket, and the impression we got from talking to them was that they were determined to strike to prove that they were indeed a union.
As of today, we got a union. Prior to that, we did not have any union.
You've been paying dues for years. What do you
mean? We've been paying dues for years, and we've been getting nothing back. And this is true of all the brotherhoods. And Dennis is the first man that had backbone enough to say, go out on strike if we don't get what we want.
This is Kenneth Gale in Chicago. Here, as in New York, commuters managed to wend their way downtown in cars and buses without too much trouble today. But Chicago is the nation's biggest railhead, and here you can see the enormous impact the rail strike can have on freight shipments. Trains carry more than $40 million worth of freight through here a day. Heavy loads are the hardest hit. The auto industry is saying the rail strike could force them to curtail production within 48 hours. Trucks, of course, will pick up whatever share of the load they can, particularly such essentials as perishable food products. But long-distance trucking costs more, and that means higher grocery prices ultimately. A rail strike now could also mean you didn't mail your Christmas packages early enough. Already the Chicago Post Office has stopped shipment of all but first class and air mail beyond a 300-mile limit. Railroad freight through Chicago adds up to about $14 billion a year. The daily payroll here is more than $1 million. That gives you some idea of how much a rail strike could cost. Kenneth Gale, ABC News, Chicago.
This is Don Farmer in New Orleans. The economic effect of the rail strike was felt here mostly on the waterfront. New Orleans is the nation's second largest port. 60% of the city's economic wealth is related to port activities. Shippers and longshoremen yesterday began preparing for a slowdown. Rail cars were rushed to the docks so that loading of ships could continue after the strike began. Even so, there was little activity at the port today. More than half the goods in and out of here are moved by rail. The trucks were operating, and that accounted for what little work there was available. The fear here was that the strike might be a long one. The port director, Edward Reed, talked of what could happen if that should take place.
We would have a protracted strike. There's no question that at some point longshoremen wouldn't be working, steamship agencies wouldn't be working. You'd have the backlash to the banks here because, of course, there's a lot of financing that has to go on in this, so it just permeates the whole community.
There were a few trains running along the docks today, but they were being operated by management personnel. By late this afternoon, none of the strikers had returned to work. A long strike could cripple this town. New Orleans' other major industry, tourism, always drops off around Christmas time. The city does not need any more money problems right now. Don Farmer, ABC News in New Orleans.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
Maybe there's a better reason to keep your lips soft and nice. To relieve chapping, soothe soreness. Maybe there's a better reason to care, but there's no better care for your lips than ours. Chapstick. Regular or new flavored lip balm. If you don't care for your lips, nobody else will.
The people who make Chapstick lip balm are very concerned about another part of your body, your hands. Because you put them in detergents and cleansers, you need Chap-Hands. It's medicated to soften and help heal dry, rough, red hands. Chap-Hands works even in detergent water to make your hands look better and feel better. Don't fool around with your hands. Really do them some good. Get Chap-Hands.
Israel's Prime Minister Golda Meir said this afternoon she is willing to meet the President of Egypt anytime and in secret, if he wishes, to get the Middle East peace talks started again. The United States is now convinced that the Paris peace talks on Vietnam are not going anywhere, so an entirely new tack was tried today. The Allies proposed that the only subject on the table be the release of prisoners of war and that daily talks be held starting tomorrow. As a start, South Vietnam offered to release all communist prisoners if the enemy will do the same. The Viet Cong refused. 27 Americans were killed in combat last week in Vietnam. Once again, non-combat deaths were higher. That total for the week was 31 men. The situation in Cambodia is now so bad that Premier Lon Nol personally flew to the front lines today to cheer on his troops. The communists are massing about 35 miles northeast of Phnom Penh, probably to attack the capital. Here in Washington, Secretary of State Rogers went before a skeptical Senate Foreign Relations Committee to appeal for more aid for the Cambodians. ABC Capitol Hill correspondent Bob Clark reports.
The committee's doves led the fight earlier this year to bar any further use of American troops in Cambodia. The Secretary of State assured them today that President Nixon has no intention of sending American forces back into Cambodia, even if its government is in danger of falling to the communists. While he stopped short of promising American troops would never be used, he expressed confidence that South Vietnamese forces could defend Cambodia without American help. Senator Fulbright was skeptical.
Supposing now in the dry season, which there has been some suggestions in the press, that they launch a very serious all-out offensive, can we have your assurance that you would not respond, assuming Phnom Penh was overrun?
Based on what we think might happen, considering the worst that might happen, that there's no intention, he has no intention of reintroducing ground forces into Cambodia. The political imperatives are such that this administration cannot get involved that way.
I wish you'd elaborate that.
Well, because we wouldn't have public support, we wouldn't have congressional support. It would be inconsistent with the entire policy of this administration, which is to reduce our presence in Indochina. We haven't gotten involved. We aren't going to.
The president wants $255 million from Congress for military and economic aid to Cambodia. Senator Fulbright hinted he may try to hold up any new funds for Cambodia to permit a full debate by the new Congress next year. Bob Clark, ABC News, Washington.
For 3 weeks, witnesses at the trial of Lieutenant William Calley have described scenes of bloody massacre at My Lai. Well, today the defense was heard for the first time. Their contention is this, that no innocent people were killed. Here's a report from ABC's Roger Peterson.
Lieutenant William Calley's defense attorneys announced today that Calley would take the stand in his own behalf. In his opening statement, Chief Defense Attorney George Latimer also said they would prove My Lai had long been a Viet Cong area, that the people there were all VC or VC sympathizers, and the men went into the village with orders to kill.
I made a statement that to remove all doubt that Lieutenant Calley would take the stand in his own behalf, explain his actions and conduct so that the court could get a full picture of what was happening and what did happen at My Lai.
You have never contended, have you, sir, that Lieutenant Calley did not kill anyone?
I have not made no contention one way or the other on that.
Sir, could you tell us what the men's orders were when they went into My Lai?
The order said to kill everything in the village.
Later, depositions were read from witnesses unable to be present. 2 defense attorneys acted out the parts. A Vietnamese interpreter's testimony showed he asked Captain Ernest Medina, Calley's commander at My Lai, why all the killing? And Medina replied, "That's our orders, don't ask any more questions." Daniel Hill, a helicopter crew chief, testified by deposition he saw only 5 to 10 bodies in a ditch after the troops moved out. Prosecution witnesses had said the ditch was full of bodies. A former chaplain, Episcopalian priest Carl Creswell, testified in person that he talked with 2 senior officers the night before the My Lai operation. They told him if they got any return fire, they would level the village. Creswell said when he objected, one officer told him, "It's a tough war." Roger Peterson, ABC News, Fort Benning, Georgia.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
How do you make a blender blend better?
Sears presents the Blendmaster jar. Most blenders simply spin food around like this. Sears' new Blendmaster creates a powerful folding action, so it blends more thoroughly in less time. No other blender blends like the Blendmaster.
See the revolution in countertop appliances at Sears.
A funny thing happened to Pat after her new Sears trash compactor was delivered. Lou dropped by with her garbage. Pat showed Lou the automatic spray deodorant and the key-operated safety lock. Then Joy dropped by with her garbage. So Pat showed Joy how the compactor crushes aerosol cans, bottles, bones, everything. A whole week's worth of trash in one leak-proof bag. Ask about a 10-day free home demonstration. Work out your own deal with the neighbors.
You work hard all your life, where does it get you? In the neck, in the back, in the arm, and in the shoulder. What are you going to do? Absorbine Jr. Absorbine Jr. has got hard-working medicines that increase the circulation where you put it on. Penetrating heat gets deep into aching muscles, warms them up, loosens them up, relaxes them. That feels good. Absorbine Jr. works fast, too. In no time at all, your sore muscles start feeling free and natural again, like having a warm bath. It's easy to put on with its handy applicator top, and it's not greasy. Absorbine Jr., try it. After all, you work hard. You want something that works hard for you. Absorbine Jr. works as hard as you do. You know, you're a good wife.
A law that went into technical effect on July 1st, 1969 is going to be partially implemented, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare said today, next year. It's a measure requiring states to screen and treat health defects in poor children, giving matching federal funds for help to children with deafness, asthma, eye defects, anemia, and other health problems associated with poverty and bad nutrition. William Ruckelshaus, the first director of the new Environmental Protection Agency, came out strong in his first out-of-Washington appearance today and immediately ran into a strong rebuttal. Vern Odom reports from WQXI-TV in Atlanta.
In his first major action as head of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, William Ruckelshaus today served notice on 3 major U.S. cities, Detroit, Cleveland, and Atlanta, to halt violation of water quality standards or face possible court action. The demands were made during an address in Atlanta to the nation's mayors. He gave the 3 cities 180 days to get procedures underway that would satisfy the agency's standards.
In a country in which the federal standards and the state standards are not being complied with, but we found these 3 cities to be the ones in which we felt the situation was the most serious, and for that reason we felt that a 180-day notice provision was warranted in this situation, and we're hopeful that within that 180-day time we can come up with an agreement with these 3 cities whereby the situation can be remedied.
Mayor Carl Stokes of Cleveland responded, charging the federal government has not kept good its promise of financial assistance in Cleveland's efforts to clean up the Cuyahoga River and Lake Erie.
Not one place in his statement did he ask this great reservoir of political support, potential political support, to help him, to help the president, to help the administration to get the wherewithal that could get the money that would help all of us to move to the goal that we're all united in, namely a better environment for our country. They're a very poorly mishandled and bungled opportunity.
It might have helped you, Mayor.
It served only just to be an insult to those of us who are doing everything we can at the local level.
It might have helped you if you'd heard the speech.
I read your speech.
That is precisely what I asked the people to do.
Where is it in here?
You weren't there at the speech. I asked
you
the
didn't speak
mayor
outside of your speech. And I ask you, sir, to join with the cities in trying to be constructive, not using some kind of cheap political shot at some cities that are doing their best.
Mayor Roman Griggs of Detroit issued an ultimatum of his own, giving the federal government a deadline of 1 day less than he was given. Griggs wants the government to provide money for water pollution control within 79 days. This is Vernon Odom reporting from Atlanta.
From Moscow, we hear the Russians are adopting a tough line against the pollution of their rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. The Supreme Soviet approved a strict law to protect their water against pollution, littering, and exhaustion. Howard?
Harry, you've heard people say that man is gambling with his environment and sooner or later his luck's going to run out. Well, that's the theme of many new ecology party games which have appeared on the department store shelves in time for Christmas gift giving. One of them is ominously called Extinction, and we invited its inventors, some friends, and ABC's Bill Downs to roll the dice and see who survives.
You know, you're overpopulated. You better watch out what you draw next time.
Famine.
You're extinct. Take your dice off.
I lose this round. Well, I suppose it was inevitable that someone would invent a game these days called Extinction. The inventor, Dr. Stephen Hubble of the University of Michigan.
It's a game of ecological competition between species on an imaginary island of Darwinia mapped on the game board. The species compete for the occupancy of the habitat shown on the board.
But they're not men.
No, they're animals because the purpose of the game is to put you in the shoes of an endangered species. You can see very easily in the game from strategy how to prevent overpopulation. And the objective is to make people identify emotionally with the problems of overpopulation and environmental disturbance that man is causing.
Well, let's take this situation. I am a creature who lives in marshes. My genetic card says that I am resistant to water pollution, that I reproduce in marshes. Now, how can I be wiped out?
Well, if man destroys your habitat, there's very little you can do about it. You are eliminated. You become extinct.
Okay, let's find out what we do. Environmental change. So, marshes used as garbage dump.
In that case, you have become extinct because your population is only in marshes. You are eliminated.
Zapped by the garbage man. Bill Downs, ABC News, Washington.
Like everything else, inflation has hit the ecology game market. That game, for example, goes at $11.95 a set.
Hey, Bert, how's the car running? Oh, great now, but last week, whoa, headache. Transmission trouble. So my neighbor said, why don't you call AMCO?
Yeah, fella called. I told him to bring it in. Of course, if it wouldn't run, I would have towed him in.
First thing he did was a road test. Then he put it up on the lift. He really checked it out.
I performed our free 19-point multi-check. Discovered it needed more than a minor adjustment.
He explained you'd have to dismantle and inspect the transmission.
This way, I could tell him exactly what it would cost.
Cost a lot less than I figured. So I give him the go-ahead.
I did the job in one day. In most cases, that's all it takes. And the service he received is backed by over 500 AMCO dealers from coast to coast.
Boy, if you ever have transmission problems, there's only one place to go. AMCO!
When your car's transmission starts to go, take it to AMCO. Our mission is transmissions. AMCO.
In other news, Henry Ford II, board chairman of the Ford Motor Company, believes the administration's economic policy is inflationary. Ford said today he has not seen any evidence of effective action to control inflation. He also said he was opposed to governmental wage and price controls because he said they never work. But on the basis of general economic conditions, Ford did predict a boom in auto sales next year that could reach record proportions. Congressman Al Mendel Rivers of South Carolina undergoes heart surgery tomorrow in Birmingham, Alabama. Rivers, who is chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, is 65 years old and has had heart problems for some time. Senators say they like cautious deliberation, so it's not surprising that they still have not agreed to break tradition and take in their first girl page. But they were nudged along a little today by Senator Jacob Javits of New York, who wants the honor of sponsoring the first female page in the Senate's history. He introduced his candidate to newsmen. ABC's Sam Donaldson reports.
Javits, intent on picking the perfect candidate, wanted a girl attractive but wholesome, intelligent but quiet about it, a New York Stater living at home in the Washington area to forestall chaperone problems. He found her in 16-year-old Paulette DeSalle, a modern girl but no radical.
Well, when I applied for the position, it wasn't through any thought of women's lib. I just really wanted to become a page.
And how does Paulette think the 25 boy pages will receive her?
I really don't know, but I do hope it's a good reception.
Paulette, how did you find out about the word that you had been appointed, and what was your reaction?
I found it out in school yesterday. My guidance counselor told me, and I was just thrilled. I nearly screamed in the hall.
Such enthusiasm will have to be suppressed if she does join the boys. Only senators are allowed to scream around the Capitol. But it will be worth it. In addition to the honor, Paulette will come into some real money for a 16-year-old. The pay is $6,960 a year. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, Washington.
We'll be back with tonight's comment in a moment.
You'd love to have a Maytag washer and dryer, but no room? Well, size up the Maytag Porta-Pair. It's a complete portable laundry in half the space. Maytag Porta Washer, Porta Dryer. No installation. Store in a closet. Great for apartments and mobile homes. Optional stack rack, too. See? It doesn't care where you live. The Porta-Pair. Only by Maytag. The dependability people.
Some women like hand cream, some like lotion. But if your hands aren't as soft as your face, you need Paquin. Cream or lotion, Paquin gives you the same kind of moisturizers you get in your face cream. The kind that keeps your skin looking young. The kind that helps turn dry skin soft again. That's what you do for your face. That's what Paquin does for your hands. Paquin, hand cream or lotion, both with face cream moisturizers.
Those of us who re-enlisted after World War II, I was not among them for reasons which seemed good enough at the time, usually did so in a simple but dignified ceremony with some lieutenant that the recruiting sergeant had waked up. Yesterday, 5 men who had chosen to re-up took their oaths at the White House, and President Nixon said the homily. It's a measure of the concern people feel about the proud military services of the United States. Their morale and efficiency and sense of purpose and mission have been perhaps the most serious casualties in the long run of the war in Vietnam. I don't know what the percentage of people would be right now who would say unreservedly that they want the armed forces out of Vietnam. But it would be a fantastically higher figure than the number of people who don't want any army at all. Even opponents of the war, as steadfast as Senator George McGovern, make it clear that they are not advocating dismantling our military strength. They feel, on the contrary, that a major evil of the Vietnam adventure has been to weaken our ability and resolve to use our strength in good causes elsewhere. More than half the men called for the draft find legal ways to avoid it. Race problems in uniform are so great in Vietnam that a crack division has to set up a hotline to the Inspector General. Soldiers off duty get out of uniform and sometimes put on wigs to avoid ridicule from their contemporaries. To people who remember their own service with some affection and pride, this is depressing. The world, we hope, may come to an era when armies are not needed, but in the meantime, it is frightening to see the erosion of our army by a task it cannot master and the country cannot fully support. Howard?
Thank you, Harry. That's tonight's news and the comment. I'm Howard K. Smith. Good night.
This has been the ABC Evening News with Howard K. Smith in Washington and Harry Reasoner in New York. Monday through Friday in color. This has been a presentation of ABC News. There are 5 great regional bowl games scheduled this weekend, including Tulane versus Colorado in the Liberty Bowl. Watch the action Saturday on NCAA football, followed by the Muhammad Ali-Oscar Bonavena 15-round heavyweight fight.